In collaboration with Revell, I will be building one of their latest releases. It's a fully new tooled model of the Jaguar E-Type. So let's get a look at the box itself, some of the general contents, and then go over them in a bit more detail further on in the video. So during that quick initial glance at the instructions and also the contents of the kit, you can clearly see that there is no shortage of parts. The chassis and interior have been exceptionally well detailed, with various different parts taken to the absolute max of detailing for a kit in this price range. As you can see, everything is nice and clean. It doesn't really have all that big of a mold line on it itself, as these are pretty fresh molds, of course, with it being a pretty new tool. So on the first sprue we had a lot of the chassis components. On this next sprue we have more of the interior and also the engine components. As you can see, the engine is made out of multiple parts, making it very detailed, and even the casting on the engine block itself is super cool and nicely detailed, again with a Jaguar logo and 3.8 liter for the engine size. Same goes of course for all the other parts, and another cool thing is a left and right hand drive option for the dashboard, which is super cool to see. The steering wheel is also one of the iconic features of this car, and they didn't skimp out on any details here either. To house and mount all those parts too, there are of course some other sprues included in the kit. Here you can see the firewall, which is also incredibly nicely detailed. It doesn't really have all that many separate parts and pieces, but it does have a lot of nice molded in detail. Same goes for some of the other parts. I think this is where the radiator goes, the lower half of the front cowl for the hood, and some of the other vents and parts around the engine bay, including some subframes and some nice tubes. All of those parts of course need to go onto something as well, and that is in this case a nicely molded chassis. On the rear there is a part of the body, so that needs to be painted body color. You can of course paint the entire chassis in body color, or just paint this first, then mask off that part to paint the rest in a black or undercoated finish, whichever you of course prefer. On the top side of this part there is the base for the interior, so there are a couple general details for where you need to place the seats, and of course where all the other parts need to mount to as well. And then there of course are some parts for the interior too. The main tub on the rear with some really nice molded in details again for some of the slats, and the door panels too, including some of the other parts for around the interior. With this being a classic car, of course, there are a lot of parts that are chromed. In this case, you get a sprue for some of the front parts with the window frames, even some mirrors, and some other parts for the in and exterior. And then there is, of course, also the main sprue, which has a lot of parts for in the engine bay, even some detail parts for the exterior, like some door handles, some window wipers, and even the knockoffs or knock-ons for the wheels themselves in order to be mounted. And of course there are the wheels. Now these are a one-piece molded design, so they aren't see-through spokes, so they do need a bit of attention with either some weathering or some other methods just to low light the lower laying areas and make them a bit darker and not just make it look like one chrome bulge of wires, of course. And for those wheels to mount to, there are some tires included as well. These need a bit of attention as that centerpiece probably needs to be cut out. This is just for molding purposes, I'm pretty sure, but otherwise it does have some nice thread pattern, some details on the side, and it looks pretty good already. Now I'm not sure if I'm going to keep these wheels or maybe upgrade them to something bigger, keeping it classy of course, but we'll see in the future. There is a sprue with Clearparts as well, or actually there are two sprues with Clearparts. One with some detailed parts for the headlights. These have some nice details molded into them. And of course the main headlight covers themselves that go on top of them later. And then you get the main sprue with the Clearparts for the front, side and rear. Some of the parts that are detailed are molded in here. As you can see, these are the window frames that are molded into the window itself. So that needs a little bit of attention to get nice, but it seems that the casting is super crisp and that isn't really that big of a deal to do. So the main body on this one is molded in two bigger pieces. You get one with the hood that can of course open to show all of the detailed parts that you saw earlier in the video. Once assembled, it should have a super nice and clean detailed engine bay. And then there is the main body itself as well. On an earlier kit I've seen from Revell, I thought that was the convertible. This part was molded to the chassis, and in this case I'm glad to see that it's now molded to the body. And all the other parts like the front and rear section are molded separately, but those are easy to just assemble on, and the seam lines will be hidden by the bumpers, I'm pretty sure. Now the casting on this one, as you can see, is very clean as it's super shiny already straight out of the mold. Normally it's a bit hazy or doesn't look this shiny, so that's a good clean cast, I'd say. Now the downside to this is that it is molded in red, which will make it a bit harder to paint it in any other color than red or pink. Now I'm going to try my best and you'll see how I'll figure that out in the video series itself. Before we forget, there is of course also a nice decal sheet included as well. With these Revell kits you can count on it that they are super detailed and have an incredible printing quality. These are printed in Italy. I think they are printed by Cartograph, but I'm not really sure. They used to be in the past, but nonetheless it's a really clean decal sheet. All of the details are super crisp and also have multi-colors of course, and even some metallics in them as well.